Hey, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Lakers for Tuesday. Brian Kamenetsky and Andy Kamenetsky. The Lakers are getting ready for I'm going to call it a must-win game in Houston, Andy, on Tuesday night, but it's a damn important one, to say the least. Russell Westbrook defends himself. The coaching staff defends Russell Westbrook. And meanwhile, people are floating Russell Westbrook trades on the internet. We'll talk about that and more on today's episode of Locked On Lakers.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Want to thank everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday. We get this thing posted. You find it wherever you get your podcasts. Get it up as early as we possibly can so you can listen to it whenever you need it. I want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Truebill. Truebill is the new app that saves you money by helping you identify and stop paying for the subscriptions you don't want or need, and can even negotiate better deals on those you want to keep. We talked at length on Monday, Andy, about Russell Westbrook and the Christmas Day disaster. Hit one shot in the second half en route to a 4 for 20 day overall. Missed a bunch of critical shots inside and had a terrible defensive lapse against Patty Mills late. It was a really bad game for Russ. Fans, to say the least, not happy, and expressed that both on the Locked On Lakers comments page, Locked On Lakers, on YouTube,
which is always appreciated, by the way.
Oh yeah, no, not by Russ in this particular case, but
no, he doesn't get a vote.
No, but in terms of for us, we appreciate the comments. Certainly at Cam Brothers on Twitter, and I don't know if this was just perfectly timed for us or whatever. It led to, and today we saw Monday we saw couple things. One from Kevin O'Connor at The Ringer, one from Sam Quinn at CBS, kind of discussing the concept of like what the Lakers can do about Westbrook to try to fix what isn't working. And both of them floated trading him for John Wall. So John Wall for Russell Westbrook became a thing on social media that was trending. And, it just gives you an idea of how crazy things are right now and the level of frustration, because that is desperate times call for desperate measures stuff.
John Wall for Russell Westbrook part due, because if you recall, they have actually been traded for each other. That is how Russell Westbrook ended up in DC and John Wall ended up in Houston. I guess eventually what would happen is the Lakers would send John Wall back to DC and the whole thing will come full circle. Russ will eventually end up back in Oklahoma City, and the Lakers can be part of facilitating that history.
He can retire a Thunder.
Yeah, exactly. That is bizarre on a few levels. First of all, many of the issues that you have with Russell Westbrook are the same issues that you have with John Wall. That is in part the reason why they have been traded for each other, is that in certain respects, you just feel like you are getting maybe a different, more specifically better version of the guy that you already have. It also speaks to the desperation that Laker fans, I guess now increasingly a little bit of NBA media, is feeling with this situation, or just feeling like they want to throw some bleep against the wall and see what sticks, because there is no, at this point, tangible evidence that John Wall is a healthy basketball player. And
well, in part, it's not his fault. The Rockets won't let him play.
Whatever.
No, you're right. Nobody's seen him.
Right. You need to actually see the guy play. But it speaks to just where this thing is right now, if nothing else, in terms of overall sentiment with Russell Westbrook, that people feel like, you know what, maybe a better route for the Lakers would be to trade Russell Westbrook for a guy that's very similar to Russell Westbrook and actually more injury prone. Let's do this.
Yeah. I mean, look, the only argument you can make for that is, John Wall is a clutch guy. So in theory, they know how healthy he is.
I mean,
I'm not advocating. I'm not Andy. I'm not advocating.
I'm just going to say right now, I'm not always convinced that clutch does. What the hell are you doing with your? What are you doing right now?
Wiping off my camera. It was blurry.
I'm not always convinced that clutch works specifically with the Lakers in ways that are always best for the Lakers, and that's a discussion for another day.
Yes. But
I mean, it would be convenient for Rich Paul if like all of his clients were one place, like, if he's trying to have a business lunch.
No, I for sure. It's commuting times and all that.
Yeah.
You save on that. It's something that, like, the basketball aspect of it is, first of all, it's not going to happen because there is no incentive for the Rockets to make that deal. The Lakers, they could make the Lakers throw in, the first couple first round picks that they could do. They could make it so, painful if the Lakers were that desperate to get rid of. But like John Wall isn't enough of a solution that the Lakers are just gonna be like, yes, we'll do whatever you need. Just give us that, so we can get, like, it's not a practical thing. Where I think it's interesting though is this argument about Russ. And we said a bunch of times, like, Russell Westbrook's not coming off the bench. He's not going to, not finish fourth quarters. He's not going to do all this stuff. And, we were saying, we called him by a fair margin the second best player that the Lakers have available. And again, you go to Monday's YouTube page and it's, people railing on that concept, calling Malik Monk significantly better than Russell Westbrook, saying that, by what measurement is Russ the second best player on this team? And it's like, people stop. I get the frustration. What's fascinating about this to me, though, Andy, and it gets a little bit to comments that Westbrook had today, that kind of defending himself, that David Fizdale had both after Sunday's game or Saturday's game and Monday at practice, defending Westbrook. He's kind of doing exactly what you would want him to do in the way that you would want him to do it. Kevin O'Connor wrote about this at The Ringer. His usage rate is way down. His 3-pointers are way down. His shooting is almost, half of it comes at the rim and probably half of the other half comes at that elbow, for that bank jumper that he likes so much. He is playing like the responsible version of Russell Westbrook that everyone hoped he would be coming into the year. I don't know if that's helpful, but it's kind of true.
Yeah. I mean, there was the question heading into the season. I know it's something you and I talked about a lot before things began, of just like the idea of how much can Russell Westbrook actually adjust his game? How much is he capable of it? How much is he willing to do it? How much should the Lakers want him to actually do it? And he's been making, I think, some adjustments around the margins, but on balance, he is basically being Russell Westbrook. And to some degree, he has to be Russell Westbrook. Otherwise, the Lakers are trading for somebody different. And if that's the case, they should have just traded for somebody different, as opposed to arguably the most complicated player in the entire freaking league to blend into your team. As I've said many times, Russell Westbrook is probably the least blendable player in the NBA. He is the least subtle player in the NBA. And he had a quote during Monday's practice where, talking about how he's been playing this year. And he said, honestly, I think I've been fine. The conversation has been heavily on how I'm playing, what I'm doing, but I think people are expecting me to have bleeping 25, 15, and 15, which is not normal. Everyone has to understand, like, that is not a normal thing that people do consistently. And while I think Russ is wrong in terms of why people are criticizing his play, I don't think it has a thing to do with his stats other than shooting percentages. I think it does speak to, fundamentally, Russell Westbrook sees himself as the best barometer for what he's doing on the court, and really the best evaluator of what makes Russell Westbrook, and whether or not he's fitting in and carrying the load for whatever team he plays for.
To your point, he says people are saying let Russ be Russ. I think nobody understands what that means. I think people just say it, let Russ be Russ, but nobody actually knows what that means but myself. And I'm going to lean on that and make sure I do what I'm supposed to do and let everything outside the locker room, whatever that may be, take care of itself. And he talks about what I do is I play my ass off. That's what I do.
Yeah.
And let's stick on this for a second, because the fit question, and that question of like, what does it mean to let Russ be Russ? And what does it mean if Russ is different than what Russ would be?
And also, too,
yeah, go ahead.
Really quick, what he's being asked to do by his coaches, and his teammates, I get to some degree, but also specifically the coaches, because that is also something that came up during this conversation that I think fits into the whole let Russ be Russ. What does that even mean question that was addressed during Monday's practice?
All right, we'll do all that next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by Truebill. Do you know why free trials renew without your consent? It's a business scam out to get you. Don't let greedy corporations pocket your money. Download Truebill to take control of your subscriptions. Truebill is the new app that helps you identify and stop paying for subscriptions you don't want, need, or just forgot about. On average, people save up to $720 a year with Truebill. Companies purposely make subscriptions such as a hassle to cancel, but Truebill makes it incredibly simple. Just link your accounts and Truebill will cancel the unwanted subscriptions in one tap. Truebill has over 2 million users and they have helped them save collectively over $100 million. So don't fall for subscription scams. Start canceling today at Truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. Go right now, Truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. It could save you thousands a year. Truebill.com/LockedOnNBA.
Westbrook, kind of alluded to, the idea that everybody expects him to average a triple double and this. And I agree with you. I don't think that's like when you look at like fan reaction or media reaction. I actually don't think that's what people are expecting. I don't think this is a look at Westbrook's statistics.
No, we hear, Brian, from a lot of Laker fans through a lot of different avenues, and we've heard a lot of complaints about Russell Westbrook. Not a single one of them has been, we were promised triple doubles, damn it, as an average, and we have not gotten that.
Right. And in theory, the best of Westbrook from a statistical perspective, at least, is still to come because this has been his pattern over the course of his career. He gets better as seasons go along, certainly over the last few years. But it's fit. And, it's such a fascinating question to me whenever you have a player like Westbrook, when you acquire somebody like Westbrook. He's not a first-year player, second-year player, third year. The guy has been in the league for over a decade. It is very well established what Russell Westbrook is. And so this idea that like he's capable of being something else, that that Westbrook could play in a very different fashion. He's, really, it just seems so strange to me that you would even consider that as something that is a viable option. I to some degree, I do empathize a little bit with what that even means when, letting Russ be Russ. I don't know what people would expect him to do other than iron out your worst tendencies, try to be responsible about your best ones, and that's it. And I think he's, like I said, I think he's kind of trying to do that in a relatively effective way. The problem is Russell Westbrook being Russell Westbrook just is an awkward fit with this team. It just is. And it's not solving the issues that the Lakers, to this point, it is not solving the issues that the Lakers hoped his presence would solve.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's frustrating for fans when they watch this because while he is trying to be, I think it has been more responsible in certain respects offensively when it comes to shot selection and being a little more judicious on that front, not keeping the ball in his hands constantly. You are at times seeing, the erratic finishes and the bad decisions with the ball in terms of really avoidable turnovers. And then there's also a responsibility that people were hoping to see more from defensively, which just that has not been there even remotely on a regular basis. I mean, acknowledging Russell Westbrook has never been a good defender, maybe in his career, certainly not for a long time. I think for a little while he had a reputation defensively just because he played so hard and he's so athletic.
Right. And he, it's a bit, could hawk for steals and jump passing lanes and whatever.
Right. But the truth is, though, he has not been a good defender in quite some time.
Ever.
But right. And in that respect, any improvements or sort of overall awareness, we talked about the Patty Mills fiasco earlier in the show and in Monday's show, stuff like that feels like Russ simply being stubbornly Russ in terms of Russ being Russ.
No, not to me.
Well,
and I will say because I don't think it's conscious. I don't think he's, being inattentive defensively to try to prove a point. I don't
No,
think
but
he's. I
but
think
it's
what it is.
consciously, look, man, it's conscious in the sense of you're being told to do something. You've been in the league long enough to know to do it.
I don't
You're
think
smart enough to understand it all.
No, but I disagree, Andy. The muscle memory of how guys play defense and how they do stuff is built up over time. And the idea that at 33, the Lakers could get Westbrook to do things defensively that that he's never really seemed capable of doing, or never really done defensively, to me is more of a problem with the Lakers. And I don't think he's stubbornly refusing to try to follow their defensive principles. I don't think he's. I disagree. I don't think he is.
I don't think it matters.
I don't think he has. It does matter, because whether he's doing it willfully versus doing it because he's not, just not. He doesn't have. It has never been expected of him to do it, or hasn't been expected of him in a long enough time. To me, makes a difference.
Well,
I understand what you're saying, that it may not matter in the end result.
No, I'm saying actually. No, what I'm saying is
go ahead.
Russell Westbrook has been in the league long enough to know to pay attention to the guy you're supposed to be marking. And when he drifts off from some other guy, that's stubbornness, man. That's you stubbornly not paying attention to the things you're supposed to be doing. I'm sorry, but it is. That's
you're implying
gambling
for to what end? Do you think he's trying to sabotage?
No,
the
I don't think he's.
just...
Sometimes you're stubborn without even knowing it. You get entrenched in stances and things like that. But he is a smart enough, bright enough guy to be thinking about stuff if he really wants to think about it.
And I think for a lot of games, he tries real hard and doesn't lose principles. And then in too many moments, as he has throughout his entire freaking career, this isn't the first time that he's played on competitive teams. But my point is, it's like you can only ask for so much in how he's going to play offensively, and you can only expect so much in terms of how he's going to play defensively. And I wish he were better, but if you didn't expect Westbrook to be a guy who was going to have these kinds of breakdowns defensively, the guy who was going to make these kinds of mistakes defensively, and some of his defensive numbers, when you go through the Cranges numbers and all that, they're not all terrible. Some of them are, but like, if you didn't expect some of this to happen, the problem was on you, not Russ.
You can be silly in your expectations while Russ is still being wrong. It's not an either or.
I agree. I wish he were better.
Right.
But
I'm just saying,
none of this surprises me.
I'm not saying it should surprise you. I'm just saying whether it surprises you or not, in certain respects, is irrelevant. What he's doing is what he's doing. Whether you expected him to do it or not is a separate issue.
So ultimately, the level of frustration that you could feel from Westbrook, who wants really, really badly to play well, to meet expectations. He knows that if the Lakers season flames out and it's 16-18, it ain't all his fault, but they're on a road towards flaming out. That this is going to be a massive knock on his career, because right now, you've seen the memes. I saw another one today of like Russ as the Grim Reaper, and he's killed Kevin Durant, and he's killed John Wall, and he's killed, every star that he's played with suffers and dies next to Russell Westbrook in one way, shape, or form, and LeBron is next. He is as much as we talk about how Westbrook doesn't give a bleep what you think, how he dresses, all this other stuff, he's certainly very aware of it. And has a ton of professional pride in what he is, and he's one of the 75 best players of all time, and he deserves to be in there. He's a Hall of Famer. How you find a place where Westbrook can be maximized and the fit can be figured out and all this other stuff is the key, because like Russ in the end needs to be right, because he's incapable of being anything else.
Sure.
And I guess he can define it better than everyone else. And the Lakers,
he clearly thinks he can define it better than everybody else.
The coaching staff
said
try to guide it as much as as they can. And Russ definitely, I'm not disagreeing with you, needs to be open-minded about cutting without the ball and all this. And I think he's trying, like, on that kind of stuff. It just ultimately comes down to, like, the Lakers did something here with Westbrook that the possibility of it not working was always a massive one.
Of course.
And it doesn't mean it still can't work, but like overcoming this stuff was always going to be hard.
Sure. But my concern, though, especially after hearing Russ, and I encourage people to go to Lakers.com. You can find the video from this practice. My concern in particular, and I hadn't really had this concern until this particular practice, and Russ talking about Russ being Russ, and specifically being asked about some of the messaging that he hears from Frank Vogel or then David Fizdale, like the idea of Russ has got to be
he hears
aggressive all the time. He's got to
hears
be,
it from LeBron. Sure.
Right. He's got to, the ball finds energy. Sometimes he's got to be looking for the open man. That's the most valuable guy. And like stuff that could seem contradictory. And the way Russ answered this, it sounded to me like he was acknowledging it was contradictory. To me, it ultimately felt like Russ is like, I'm done with the noise and I'm going to go out there and I'm going to be me. And I have concerns now that the more Russ hears this stuff, the more entrenched he's going to become in his stance of, I'm going to do it my way, double middle fingers to anybody who says I'm doing it the wrong way. That's my concern from this. And I had not had this concern really before today. As much as I've recognized some of the stubborn tendencies that Russ has, I have not had that particular concern until this day.
The part that I, to your point, and you were saying, I'm hearing this and I hear, Frank, and I hear from Fizz and, the players. To the question was asking, saying
he was literally
LeBron,
laughing at the question when it was brought up
because
to him,
because he's heard it so many times that
I took it as him laughing at, I get what you're asking me, and it is kind of ridiculous, all the different mixed messaging that I hear.
I took it as that. I took it as I've heard 800 different versions of this question from the minute I got here. How are you fitting in? What are you doing? Are you being allowed to be yourself? Are you being like, I agree with you. Go back and listen to it. It's a really interesting moment. I think, when
we'll link
Westbrook
it in the show notes.
Media, it's the part that I would love to know. There are a couple things I would love to know. There are actually a lot of things I would love to know. What is he being told to do by the coaching staff? Kind of guess. And then what does he like if he thinks things are contradictory? What does he think is contradictory? Because, when we were talking about this before the show, for example, being told to attack all the time and being told to be aggressive off the ball, cutting, moving, those are not two things that are incompatible with each other. Those are not contradictory. Move aggressively without the ball is a form of attacking. Like that's being aggressive. All that, and so like that's the sort of the mixed messaging. If he feels like he's getting mixed messages from the coaching staff, I would love to know about what. They've lost 5 in a row, and if they lose Tuesday night against Houston, it's going to feel like Armageddon. And because the Rockets, despite their little run there, are not a good team. And the frustration level with everyone is incredibly high. And Westbrook is coming off arguably his worst game of the season. If they can win a few games, it always kind of helps this chatter go down. But this was always the kind of the parallel universe that was possible over the last couple seasons of what happens if these Lakers don't win. And we are seeing what it looks like now. Definitely a story to follow. We got some really interesting questions. The other thing that's been going on is David Fizdale has been coaching this team instead of Frank Vogel, and the Lakers haven't won. We got some really interesting questions at KamenetskyBrothers@gmail.com, which is another way people can get a hold of the show, about Vogel and about Fizdale. We'll talk about that next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this holiday season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football continues its march to the college bowl seasons and the pro football playoffs. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the sports action this season. Head to the website, use your mobile device, sign up today, receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use the promo code LOCKEDON to receive said bonus. From football, basketball, NHL, boxing, UFC, right down to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest, easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports, so don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available. BetOnline, where the games start. Really quick, Brian, before we get into this question that was posed to us about Fizdale and Vogel, there was a stat that I wanted to bring up that actually I think I have not done all the digging on it, but I think also gets to the Russ thing and the offense in general. You and I had been talking offline about the offense and the issues that it's been having of late. And you pointed out that the three-point shooting had fallen to 21st in the league over the last 15 games, which sounds bad, except the actual percentage during that period when we had talked about this was 34%, which is basically identical to their season averages and also each month individually, like in their splits. It's like maybe where they rank in the NBA has fluctuated a little bit, but not much. But basically, it's been pretty consistent. So you and I were like trying to figure out, okay, then what may account for this in terms of some of the offensive issues? So my immediate reaction was, okay, it's got to be the percentages from two, maybe specifically at the rim. But then I looked those up too. And again, cursory, I didn't go as deep into the numbers as I could have, but basically about the same month to month. And they haven't even been turning over the ball a whole lot more during this period. I mean, the Lakers just turn the ball over constantly. So I guess for better or for worse, that sort of stays the same. Here is a discrepancy, though, that I did find that depending on how you look at it, I think will maybe fans could find some reassurance in it because it is within the Lakers' control, or it's going to piss fans off even more because it is within their control. Free throws. When I looked this up, the Lakers were on the season 21.9 free throw attempts per game. They were 72%, 72.5, 29th in the NBA. Not great, but 72.5. Over the last 15 games, 22.9 free throws per game. Fifth in the NBA, and again, one free throw more per game. That percentage went down to 70.3. Over the last 5 games, 26.4 free throws per game. That's second in the league during those 5 games. 68.9% last in the league. 3% behind the 29th team, the Wizards. Time of looking this up. So an issue the Lakers were having, and I didn't even realize it was this big, they are getting to the line more and leaving more points on the board the more they go to the line.
Yes.
That's a problem.
That was actually, I noted that. Yeah, it is.
Speaking of Russell Westbrook, you know what his free throw percentage is in December?
I haven't looked it up.
59%.
Yeah. You know what that is? Not
bad.
Crazy weird for Russ, though. He has always been an inconsistent free throw shooter.
No, actually, that's not true. He's been very consistent. This is the 3rd season right now that he is currently shooting 65.6% at the line.
Inconsistent meaning he doesn't go in as consistently as you like.
But I'm just saying
he's not a good free throw.
He's actually scarily consistent.
He's consistently bad if you want.
Yes,
but so you have LeBron and you have AD, who doesn't get to the line as much as he should, and his free throw percentages have fallen off. And you have Russ, and you can be a bad 3-point shooting team, and offense across the part of this is I find interesting about their shooting percentages is that offense across the league was way down at the beginning of the year. So where the Lakers were shooting earlier in the season had them higher up against bad defenses playing a home heavy schedule. Shooting the same thing now drops you as shooting percentages have started to pick up and offense has started to pick up. How you rank relative to other teams matters, because if you're still shooting 34% when other teams are shooting 35, 36, whatever, over time, obviously that starts to hurt you because they're going to do that against you too. The free throw thing is like, this gets to the holy trinity of their offensive problems. You can be a bad free throw shooting team. You can turn the ball over too much. You can be a bad 3-point shooting team. Any one of those things, you can still have a good offense. when you start to combine all of them, you've got real problems. And the Lakers are not a good free throw shooting team. They haven't been one over, really since the LeBron era began. They turn the ball over too much and have since the LeBron era began. And the 3-point shooting certainly hasn't been as prolific or consistent as I think people hoped it would be. Certainly not recently.
Yeah. Anyway,
if you're not, but I think this is an interesting. This gets to all the stuff. You're right. It really does get to all the stuff that you were talking about with Westbrook and the problems that they have in front of you. So if you're going to have that, you had better be, balls out amazing at the rim. And Westbrook's percentages are down at the rim a little bit. LeBron's percentages are, have fluctuated at the rim. I don't have them in front of me, but like he seems, anecdotally at least, he seems to be missing a few more layups than he used to. His finish doesn't go to the rim as much. He shoots a lot more 3-pointers. All of that stuff starts to compound. And so if Westbrook slips a little bit at the rim, if LeBron slips a little bit at the rim, if Davis doesn't, play as much or get as many free throws or whatever it is, and then those supplementary things that Rob Pelinka designed to do, the shooting of Wayne Ellington, the attacking of THT, whatever it is, if those things don't make up for those gaps, you're left with a really bad offense. And that gets to some of the Lakers' problems. I don't think they can fix the free throw thing. Russ not going to be a better free throw shooter. LeBron is going to shoot what he's going to shoot. The key to this, I think, is Davis. He's fine. LeBron's doing fine.
Yeah, Davis, once he's back, needs to be better.
They're not. I don't want to pretend like they're terrible. I don't want to pretend like they don't have a chance to be good again. I don't want to pretend like a team with LeBron James, Anthony Davis, if he comes back healthy, and Russell Westbrook, who should get better over the course of the year, is buried and 30 whatever games into the season. But we talked about it. We did radio today for 710 ESPN. We talked about like how close do you think they can get to their ceiling right now? If they had 100% chance at the beginning of training camp to reach their peak capabilities, what percentage do you think they could get to now?
It's going to be tough. I mean, you don't know for sure until you know when AD is going to be back and if they can finally have some stability. But I mean, they're definitely behind the 8 ball. I mean, say
they have 40 games, but maybe they might have 40 games with all 40 games. I don't know.
40 games
seems optimistic.
Order. Oh no, it's not.
Yeah, they won't have 40 games. It'll be like 35,
40 games.
30. It's probably closer to 30. You're right.
Yeah, that's going to be tough.
That's also assuming, by the way, that when AD comes back, everyone else is still there.
Right. I mean, the biggest advantage I guess they could have in trying to make that happen is the rest of the West is dealing with basically the same stuff they are. So there are a lot of teams sort of cooperating with them. So maybe enough teams are behind the 8 ball themselves that it sort of levels out. But it's going to be difficult. There's no way around it.
Yeah, and if you can't play your way into it's becoming really critical that the Lakers can find a way to get to that 5 seed. Because even if you're starting to get it together, if you run into Utah, Phoenix, Golden State in the first round, you might need that first playoff series against whoever it's going to be to give yourself a chance to kind of play up to that next level. A first round matchup against those dudes would be a tall order, to say the least. Man, like you start going down the Westbrook rabbit hole. It symbolizes so much about everything this team is doing that, it's a little DeAndre Jordan-esque. Like he is an avatar for everything that you want to talk about, complain about, hope for, or wish for this team. So there's still a lot. We'll get to the questions that we were sent regarding Vogel and David Fizdale. We can do that this week. The NBA, Andy, is changing its COVID protocols, cutting down the number of days from 10 to 6 for their rules, but asymptomatic players and being able to test out based on their level of contagion and all that could theoretically maybe help some Lakers get back into the lineup faster. We don't know, but it's at least possible. So that's something to keep an eye out for. Magic Johnson and maybe some other people around the organization may not be super thrilled about this new Showtime show on HBO, which makes me much more excited about it.
It's going to be good.
I want to get into that. I want to make sure we talk about that this week because it's kind of fascinating in its own right. So the Lakers, never boring. That's for sure. Thanks for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day. Make sure you make a second Locked On podcast your second listen, and subscribe to Locked On Lakers on YouTube as well. See everybody on Wednesday.